Okay, so I got to do this in 1 minute and 60 seconds so I can keep this video into 15-minute range. One ugly guy did a video on this NSA scandal, basically giving a link to another site that had some great information. The video one ugly guy did is "Love the government spying on you, then don't watch this video." He links to BuckeyeBDH. He has these episodes called Security Now. I never heard of it. 408 and 409, episodes 408 and 409. I have put highlights of the show on this video in case you don't have the time to watch the whole thing. I will watch the next video and do the same thing, so there might be a part 2 to this if I feel it's necessary. So go check these guys out. Links on the comment section below. And this technology makes sense now because I've worked with stuff in this range, like WDMs, wavelength division multiplexing. That's what it sounds like to me. But I don't have enough time to even go into that. So, see ya.
Okay, so first, what was authorized under the FISA Article 215, that's the telephony metadata collection. What I found interesting about it was essentially what's going on is that all the telephone companies naturally keep the records that they need for billing. So, they're recording so-called metadata. We've talked about metadata. Metadata is essentially sort of not the main content, it's the embellishment. For example, when we talk about a browser query, there's the query and then there's the headers, and the headers are metadata. They're additional information, date and time stamp and cookies and so forth are browser metadata. Or in a file system, you're storing files, but it's also keeping track of when you last accessed the file and when it was modified and when it was created and file privileges, for example, who's able to access it. That's metadata. So similarly, telephony metadata is like where you are by like which cell tower your call is coming in on, your originating phone number, or actually it's the serial number of your phone, the number you dialed, probably where it is, maybe, though if it went off out into a different phone system, they may not have that. But basically it's your call records. It's not your conversation. It's the event features of the call. Well, what's interesting is that phone companies have no need to retain that in perpetuity. They typically only keep it for 60 to 90 days. So what's happened is, as authorized under this Article 215, the NSA has set up arrangements with all of the domestic phone companies to acquire this data before they delete it. So, and it turns out that it's not against the law to do this. The so-called business records have been ruled by the Supreme Court not to be subject to privacy protection. So, if it's AT&T or Verizon's business records, this is just their records for their own purposes.
This is like the billing information that they would
Yes,
have.
exactly. Yeah. And it's about to be deleted, and the NSA says, oh, hold on a second, let us make a copy of that. Right. Or just send it to us before you hit delete. So in listening to all of the buzz about this, there's this downplaying of, but it's not your conversations. It's just the metadata. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God. I mean, do you realize what it means? If there is a facility huge enough to capture and contain all of that, and the computing resources necessary to link it together, what this builds is an incredible graph of all of the connectivity that exists between everybody with a phone in the United States. And it's funny because in my notes, I was already making a note that the history is also really important and crucially important to the NSA, because, for example, if they got identified person who is a suspect of something, a terrorist presumably, or a bad guy of some qualifying for further surveillance, they can query this network, and what the continual collection of the data means is that they can go back in time. They have a time machine that allows them to walk back and look at the history of all past connections over time. That's unbelievably rich. And it happened that Edward, during his interview, said exactly that. So I thought it's a very short piece. We just hear it in his own words.
Won't care about surveillance.
Because even if you're not doing anything wrong, you're being watched and recorded. And the storage capability of these systems increases every year consistently by orders of magnitude, to where it's getting to the point you don't have to have done anything wrong. You simply have to eventually fall under suspicion from somebody, even by a wrong call. And then they can use the system to go back in time and scrutinize every decision you've ever made, every friend you've ever discussed something with, and attack you on that basis to sort of derive suspicion from an innocent life and paint anyone in the context of a wrongdoer.
We talked about some time ago this new facility that the NSA is building. We were scratching our heads at the time, wondering, what is a zettabyte? Because this place can store 5 of them. Right. 5 zettabytes.
Million square feet. 1.5 million square feet. Yeah.
It's a 1.5 million square feet, costing $1.2 billion, 26 miles south of Salt Lake City in a town called Bluffdale, Utah. It uses 65 megawatts of power. It's got its own power substation and, like cooling ponds, and it's just phenomenal. And at the time we were thinking, well, what are they going to put in that? What are they going to fill that with? We have an answer to that question now. AT&T's internet traffic, I'm reading now from the EFF's summary of this, and this is titled AT&T's Role in Dragnet Surveillance of Millions of Its Customers. AT&T's internet traffic in San Francisco runs through fiber optic cables at an AT&T facility located at 611 Folsom Street in San Francisco using a device called a splitter. A complete copy of the internet traffic that AT&T receives, email, web browsing requests, and other electronic communications sent to or from the customers of AT&T's WorldNet internet service from people who use another internet service provider is diverted onto a separate fiber optic cable, which is connected to a room known as the SG-3 room, which is controlled by the NSA. So what this is a fiber optic tap using a splitter in the Folsom building in San Francisco that makes a copy of, that essentially receives a copy of all the data passing along this major trunk of AT&T, and it goes into this SG-3 room, which, as EFF writes, is controlled by the NSA. The other copy of the traffic continues onto the internet to its destination. Continuing to read from the EFF document, the SG-3 room was created under the supervision of the NSA and contains powerful computer equipment connecting to separate networks. This equipment is designed to analyze communications at high speed and can be programmed to review and select out the contents and traffic patterns of communications according to user-defined rules. Only personnel with NSA clearances, people assisting or acting on behalf of the NSA, have access to this room. AT&T's deployment of NSA-controlled surveillance capability apparently involves considerably more locations than would be required to catch only international traffic. The evidence of the San Francisco room is consistent with an overall national AT&T deployment to from 15 to 20 similar sites, possibly more. This implies that a substantial fraction, probably well over half of AT&T's purely domestic traffic was diverted to the NSA. At the same time, the equipment in this room is well suited to capture and they have analysis, they meant analyze, or to the capture and analysis of large volumes of data for purposes of surveillance. I learned that fiber optic cables from the secret room were tapping into the WorldNet circuits by splitting off a portion of the light signal. And that's why the program is called PRISM, Leo. What does a PRISM do?
It splits a light signal.
Splits light.
Yep.
I saw this in a design document available to me entitled Study Group 3 LGX/splitter wiring, San Francisco, dated December 10th, 2002. I also saw design documents dated January 13th, 2004, and blah, 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 which instructed technicians on connecting some of the already in-service circuits to the splitter cabinet, which diverts some of the light signal to the secret room. The circuits listed were the peering links which connect WorldNet with other networks and hence the entire country, as well as the rest of the world. So here is what NSA has done. This is installed in San Francisco. The NSA has installed this technology, this PRISM fiber optic tapping, splitting technology, just upstream of all of those companies named. It is absolutely true that they probably never knew about it. They may be finding out about it for the first time listening to this podcast, and I imagine it will suddenly all make sense to them. The NSA has said they had direct access to these companies' servers. Well, and that's the funny thing, the thing I noticed when I realized what was going on is that server is the only word anyone knows. My mom knows the word server. You know, Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe knows about the AOL server or the Google servers. That's in the common parlance. The word that we should have been using is router. And that's not a word that people understand, but that's the key to this technology. As I was saying, routers concentrate data. Somewhere, and the NSA knows exactly where it is, Google is buying their bandwidth. And there are routers upstream of Google whose purpose it is to take the disparate packets all coming into Google and route them down fiber optic lines, which finally make the transit into Google's data center. It is unnecessary to have access to the data center if you are tapping the fiber optic line going into and out of the data center.
Okay.
So what we have is we have this system called PRISM. We have this bunch of companies that are absolutely sure that they have never agreed to blanket, eavesdropping, wiretapping with the NSA, and I believe them. If the NSA had reason to specifically require data that is specific to a given case, we already know they go to a court, they get a warrant, and under a bond of secrecy, they're able to get the data that the company has, if any, and the company is bound not to say it. Yeah. This is what I would design. Yeah. I would design this system. I would say you want to get, you need to keep this a secret. You want to get all the traffic coming in and out of Google. You get as close to Google as you can. You get on the router that is feeding Google and you clone all of the data. Yeah. And that's why it's called PRISM, is that now we're at this bandwidth level, they're using fiber optic cables, so it splits the light. The power drops by 50% down each of the splits because the power of the light has been split, but there's still plenty. And so it's going to be received easily by the other end. And then it goes off to this secret room controlled by the NSA. You could task this equipment to find things. So an analyst
smarter than just a collector. It's actually sifting.
Yes.
Yeah. It's actually
yes.
sifting. It's actually
Yes.
sifting.